The phone rang at 12:07 a.m., pulling me awake in the dark. I almost ignored it until I saw it was my grandson. "Grandpa," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Promise me you won't drink the tea tomorrow." I sat up instantly. "What are you talking about?" I heard my parents talking. "They said if you get any weaker, everything will belong to them." The room suddenly felt colder. "Grandpa, please listen. Don't take the vitamins. Don't drink anything they bring you." Before I could ask another question, the call ended, leaving me staring into silence. This story begins with trust and ends somewhere you won't expect. Before we continue, drop a quick comment for me. Have you ever had someone close to you turn out to be nothing like you thought, just yes or no? Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Quick note, some details have been fictionalized to strengthen the message. What matters is the truth it carries. The phone rang at midnight with the kind of urgency that stops your heart before your mind catches up. I jerked awake in the darkness, fumbling for the device vibrating against the nightstand. The blue glow illuminated Eleanor's side of the bed, still empty after 18 months. My eyes struggled to focus on the screen. Finn. My grandson never called this late. Never called at all, really, not since he'd started college prep and his parents had tightened their grip on his schedule. I swiped to answer. "Finn, what's wrong?" Silence, then breathing fast and shallow like he'd been running. "Grandpa." His voice, it came out barely above a whisper, trembling. "Don't drink the tea anymore. Don't take the vitamins." I sat up straighter, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Finn, what are you talking about? It's midnight. Are you okay?" I heard them. The words tumbled out, rushed terrified as if someone might overhear. "Mom and Dad, they were in the office with the door closed, but I was in the hallway and I heard..." "Slow down." "Heard what?" Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice cracked. "They said if you get any weaker, everything will belong to them. Mom said another few months and they won't have to worry about you changing your will." The room tilted. I gripped the phone tighter, my palm suddenly slick with sweat. "Finn, the tea and vitamins they bring you every week, they're not, Grandpa. I think they're doing something to you, making you sick." My throat closed. I couldn't speak, couldn't think. "I have to go," Finn whispered urgently. "If they know I called you, I don't just please, Grandpa. Don't drink anything they give you. Don't take the vitamins. Promise me." "Finn, wait!" The line went dead. I sat in the darkness, phone warm in my hand, staring at the black screen. My reflection stared back, ghostly and distorted. Behind me, the shadows of the bedroom I'd shared with Eleanor for 40 years pressed in from all sides. 7 words kept echoing. Everything will belong to them. My own son, Brock. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike, to throw a baseball, to balance a checkbook. The man who'd barely spoken to me in the 6 years since Eleanor died, who'd shown up 8 months ago with his wife Celeste and suddenly wanted to reconnect. Who'd brought gifts? The tea first. Organic chamomile blend. Celeste said good for sleep and digestion. She'd smiled when she handed it over, her perfectly manicured hands placing the blue tin on my kitchen counter like it was something precious. "Brock was worried about you," she'd said. "Living alone in this big house. We want to make sure you're taking care of yourself." Then the vitamins. A month later, custom blend from some wellness company in California. Brock had researched them himself, he'd told me, specifically for men my age. Liver support, kidney function, energy. "You're 69, Dad," he'd said, clasping my shoulder the way he used to when he was trying to convince me of something. "You need to think about your health." And the water filtration system, top of the line, installed in my kitchen at their expense. The pipes in a house this old, Celeste had explained, you never know what's getting into the water supply. How do you process the moment when your 17-year-old grandson warns you that your own child is trying to kill you? I stood on shaking legs and crossed to the bathroom. Flipped on the light. The man in the mirror looked 20 years older than 69. Hollow cheeks, gray skin, hair thinning in patches I didn't remember losing. When had that happened? 8 months ago, I'd weighed 190. Yesterday morning now, the scale read 156. 34 pounds gone. My doctor had run tests, blood work, scans. Everything came back inconclusive. Stress, he'd suggested. Grief. Depression is common in widowers your age. Have you considered speaking to someone? I'd believed him, wanted to believe him, because the alternative was that my body was betraying me for no reason, shutting down system by system while I watched helplessly. But it wasn't no reason, it was the tea, the vitamins. Every morning for 8 months without fail, every single morning, Brock called at 9 a.m. on the dot. Did you take your vitamins, Dad, with breakfast, remember? And don't forget the tea before bed, it works better on an empty stomach. Always cheerful, always concerned, always checking. Not checking that I was okay, checking that I was taking the poison. My knees buckled. I caught myself on the bathroom counter, white-knuckled, staring at my reflection's hollow eyes. 69 years old. 40 of them spent managing aerospace contracts worth hundreds of millions, negotiating with defense contractors and government agencies, reading fine print and spotting angles before they became problems. I'd survived corporate warfare, budget cuts, 3 recessions, and the death of the only woman I'd ever loved. And my own son thought I was too blind to notice he was killing me. The nausea hit suddenly. I barely made it to the toilet before everything came up: dinner. The chamomile tea I'd obediently drunk 2 hours ago, bile burning my throat. I heaved until there was nothing left, then stayed there on my knees, forehead pressed against cold porcelain, shaking. The tea, the vitamins, every morning for 8 months. Every single morning. My phone buzzed against the bathroom tile where I'd dropped it. I forced myself upright, wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. The screen showed a text from Finn sent 5 minutes after he'd hung up. Just 7 words. I'm sorry, I had to tell you. I sank back against the wall, phone clutched to my chest, and stared at the ceiling of the bathroom where Eleanor used to sing while she got ready in the morning. The house creaked around me, settling into its foundation the way it had for 80 years. 7 words from a 17-year-old boy had just rewritten everything I thought I knew about my family. If Finn was right, if he was right, then the gifts Brock brought 8 months ago weren't gifts at all. They were weapons, and I'd been swallowing them every morning, smiling and grateful while my son waited for me to die. But to understand how those weapons found their way into my home, I had to go back 8 months. Back to the afternoon when the doorbell rang and I had no idea it marked the beginning of my son's plan to kill me. April 2023. Spring sunlight through the windows of the mansion Eleanor and I had called home for 40 years. I'd been alone for 18 months since cancer took her. Brock stood on the porch with his wife Celeste. My son at 42 looked prosperous, confident. Celeste at 39 was perfectly styled designer handbag over her shoulder. Dad, Brock pulled me into a hug. We should have called first, but we've been worried about you. They hadn't visited in 6 months, but here they were carrying shopping bags and wearing concern that felt rehearsed. Come in, I said. It's good to see you both. Celeste kissed my cheek. You look tired, Alvin. Are you sleeping okay? Well enough. We brought you some things. She exchanged a glance with Brock. They unpacked in the kitchen. First came the water filtration system. Top of the line, Brock explained. The pipes in a house this old, you never know what's getting into the water. This filters out everything. Son, that must have cost. Your health is worth it. He squeezed my shoulder. Next came the vitamins. Premium bottles in sleek packaging from some California wellness company. Liver support, kidney function, immune system, Celeste explained, specifically formulated for men your age. The last item was a blue tin of loose-leaf tea. Celeste opened it, releasing sweet herbal scent. Organic chamomile blend, excellent for sleep and digestion. Brock researched it specifically for you. I held the tin touched despite myself. You didn't have to do all this.
Promise me you'll use them every day.
Brock met my eyes with what looked like genuine concern. The tea especially. It's supposed to be excellent for someone your age. I promise. That evening I brewed my first cup. The tea smelled lovely, tasted slightly sweet with an earthy undertone. I drank it in the living room where Eleanor used to read, warmed by my son's unexpected attention. Brock called the next morning at 9. Dad, did you take your vitamins with breakfast, remember? And the tea before bed works better on an empty stomach. I had the tea last night. It was very good. Perfect. I'll check in tomorrow. He called every morning after that, every single morning. By mid-May, I started waking up nauseous. Nothing dramatic at first, just queasiness that made breakfast difficult. I pushed through it, sipped the tea Brock reminded me about, daily took the vitamins with lunch. By June, I'd lost 15 pounds. Dr. Vernon Ashford, 58, and my physician for 15 years ran blood work at my annual checkup. He'd never encountered anything he couldn't eventually diagnose. Everything looks normal, he said, frowning at the results. Liver function, kidney function, blood sugar, all within acceptable ranges. Then why can't I keep food down? Stress, possibly. Grief. Depression is very common in widowers your age. Have you considered speaking to someone? I hadn't. I also hadn't told him about the hands that shook when I tried to button my shirt. 3 months, 20 pounds, 0 answers from 5 different doctors. Brock called every morning. Are you taking the vitamins, Dad? The tea? You need to keep your strength up. Always cheerful, always concerned. Never visiting, just calling to make sure I followed the routine. My daughter, Iris, 36, and living in Chicago, called once a week. How are you doing, Dad? Brock says you're managing okay. I'm fine, I lied, because what else could I say? I didn't know yet. I just knew something was wrong, and every doctor insisted I was fine. Early July, I barely made it to the mailbox. The driveway felt impossibly long. My legs trembled with every step. I grabbed the metal post for support. Black spots dancing across my vision. Alvin, honey, are you okay? Hazel Mercer, my neighbor for 12 years. 71, retired third-grade teacher with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She'd brought casseroles after Eleanor died, respected my space, waved from her porch. Now she was hurrying across her lawn, face tight with alarm. I'm fine, just a little dizzy. You're not fine. She caught my elbow, steadying me. My God, Alvin, when did you get so thin? I've been under the weather. You look like you've lost 40 pounds. Have you seen a doctor? Several. They say everything's normal. Sometimes the people who save your life are the ones who barely know you but see you clearly enough to care. Hazel walked me back to the house, made me sit at the kitchen table, poured me water from the fancy filtration system. She stood with arms crossed, studying me with the same expression she probably used on third graders who insisted they'd finish their homework. You need help, she said finally. Real help. Does your daughter know how bad this is? Iris lives in Chicago. She has her own life. She needs to know. Someone in your family needs to know because you're not okay, Alvin. You could barely stand out there. I wanted to argue, to tell her I was managing, that I didn't want to worry Iris, that Brock was already checking on me every day. But the truth was, I was terrified. I'll think about it, I said. Hazel left her number on the counter. If you won't call her, I will. That afternoon, she made the call that would eventually save my life. She dialed Iris in Chicago and said 7 words that cut through months of Brock's careful lies. Your father is dying and nobody's helping him. Iris answered Hazel's call that afternoon in her Chicago office and within an hour had booked a flight to Evanston. But she called Brock first, asking why no one had told her how bad things had gotten. My son assured her everything was fine, that I was just having a rough week, that the neighbor was overreacting. By the time Iris arrived 2 days later, I'd been coached on what to say. But I didn't learn until much later what had really set everything in motion. I didn't learn until the police interviews and the depositions what my grandson had seen that August afternoon when he arrived at my house 20 minutes early. Finn was 17 that summer, still baby-faced, despite his height, still awkward in the way teenagers are when they're growing faster than they can manage. Celeste had sent him to deliver my weekly vitamins while she and Brock ran errands. Just a quick errand, she told him. Drop them on Grandpa's kitchen counter. He arrived at 2:40 instead of 3. The front door was unlocked the way I always left it for family. Finn let himself in, calling out a greeting that went unanswered. I was napping upstairs, exhausted from the morning's nausea. He walked toward the kitchen, vitamins in hand. That's when he heard it. The quiet click of a bottle cap. The soft scrape of something against wood. The kitchen door stood slightly ajar. Through the gap, Finn saw his mother. Celeste stood at my kitchen counter, back to the doorway, completely focused on the task before her. She'd laid out a dish towel. On it sat my vitamin bottle, uncapped pills arranged in neat rows. In her hand was a small glass pipette, the kind you'd use for essential oils or laboratory work. Finn watched frozen as his mother lifted the pipette with practiced precision. A single drop of clear liquid fell onto the first vitamin, then the second, then the third. Methodical, careful, like she'd done it 100 times before. She worked through the entire bottle. When she finished, she carefully recapped it, wiped the pipette with a paper towel, and slipped both the pipette and towel into her purse. Then she placed the bottle exactly where I'd expect to find it, turned, and walked toward the hallway. Finn barely made it back to the front door before she entered the hall. He stood there breathless, trying to look like he'd just arrived. "Finn, honey, what are you doing here?" "Just delivering Grandpa's vitamins, Mom." His voice came out strangled. "You asked me to drop them off." Celeste smiled, reaching for the bottle in his hand. "Thank you, sweetie. I'll put them in the kitchen. Make sure Grandpa takes them every day, okay?" She disappeared into the kitchen. Finn heard the cabinet open, the familiar sound of her arranging things the way she always did. When she emerged, her purse was tucked firmly under her arm. "Come on, we need to pick up your father." Finn followed her to the car in silence. But before they pulled away, he'd memorized which cabinet she'd used. And the next time he visited 3 days later with me downstairs and distracted, he slipped the old vitamin bottle from the previous month into his backpack. Evidence of something he couldn't yet name. What does a 17-year-old boy do when he discovers his mother is a murderer? Finn didn't tell anyone. Not for 3 months. He told me later during the trial that he couldn't find the words. That every time he tried to imagine saying it out loud, "Mom is poisoning Grandpa," his mind shut down. It was too big, too impossible, easier to believe he'd imagined it, misunderstood what he'd seen. Except I kept getting sicker. And his father kept calling me every morning with the same questions. "Dad, did you take your vitamins with breakfast, remember? And don't forget the tea before bed." Every morning, without fail. Brock called at 9 a.m. sharp, cheerful and concerned, making sure I'd taken my daily dose of whatever was killing me. September bled into October. I lost another 10 pounds. My hand shook so badly I could barely sign my name. But whenever Iris called, suddenly Brock appeared in whatever room I was in. "Dad, is that Iris? Let me say hello." He'd take the phone, step into the hallway, and I'd hear him through the door. "Hey, sis. Yeah, Dad's right here. He's doing okay. You know how he is, doesn't want anyone to fuss." When he handed the phone back, Iris's tone had shifted. Less worried, more reassured. "Dad, Brock says the doctor told him it's just normal aging. Is that true?" "I suppose so." "Okay. Well, if you need anything, call me. But don't stress yourself out, okay?" I didn't know then that Brock had sent her photos. Old ones from before the weight loss with timestamps edited to look recent. Didn't know he'd called her separately to explain that I was becoming paranoid, that grief was making me imagine health problems that didn't exist, that the doctors had assured him everything was fine. Every call, every visit, every photo, controlled. When Iris tried to talk to me alone, Brock had reasons to stay in the room. When she suggested coming to visit, he had reasons why it wasn't a good time. When Hazel called her in July, Brock had already laid the groundwork, the overreacting neighbor, the attention-seeking widow next door, the father who just needed space to grieve in his own way. He'd built a perfect prison, One where the bars were made of phone calls and edited photos and carefully timed reassurances. One where I was dying slowly publicly while everyone who loved me was convinced I was fine. For 3 months, Finn carried that secret alone, watching his mother poison me, watching his father lie to his aunt, unable to find words for what he'd seen. Meanwhile, I grew weaker, trusting the gifts that were killing me, isolated from the one person who might have helped. But Brock's control had one weakness he didn't anticipate. My family lawyer kept records of everything. That lawyer was Harlan Bentley, and November brought the first hard frost along with the meeting that would crack my son's carefully constructed lie wide open. Harlan had called Iris directly after Hazel's warning, concerned about patterns he'd noticed but hadn't pieced together until now. 61 with silver hair and the careful manner of someone who'd spent 2 decades keeping family secrets, he'd represented the Townsend estate since Eleanor and I first drew up our wills. He'd never had reason to distrust any of us. Until Brock's phone call 8 months ago. We met in his downtown Chicago office on a gray November afternoon. Iris had driven in from her apartment. I'd made the trip despite feeling like every mile drained more life from me. Harlan stood when we entered, and I watched his face register shock at my appearance. "Alvin." He gripped my hand, then steadied me when I swayed. "Sit, please." Iris settled in the chair beside me, her lawyer instincts already activated. She'd been practicing family law for 8 years, knew how to read a room. "What did you need to tell us, Harlan?" He spread a yellow legal pad across his desk. Notes in his meticulous handwriting covered the top page. "Your brother called me in February. 7 months ago. He had questions," Harlan continued, "about guardianship procedures in Illinois. Specifically how to petition for guardianship of an elderly parent who might be experiencing cognitive decline." The air left my lungs. He wanted to know. Harlan read from his notes. How to initiate incapacity proceedings, what medical documentation would be required, how to transfer financial authority if someone was declared mentally unfit to manage their own affairs. Iris's hand found mine gripping hard. He also asked me to research the current market value of mineral rights in Evanston. Harlan looked up. That call came on February 15th. That was 2 months before he brought the water purifier and tea, I heard myself say. The words felt distant, like someone else was speaking them, because if Brock had called about guardianship in February and if he'd arrived with gifts in April, he was already planning it, Iris whispered. Before he ever walked through Dad's door with those vitamins, before the tea, he was already planning to. She couldn't finish. Neither could I. February. The call came in February. The tea arrived in April. Harlan pulled out a folder thick with documents. "I need to show you something else. Something I didn't fully understand until Iris called me about your symptoms." He spread geological survey maps across the desk. Property boundaries, underground composition analyses, letters from mining companies. 18 months ago, a mining company approached you about purchasing the mineral rights beneath your property. You declined. Do you remember? I did. Some outfit from Colorado interested in the limestone deposits under the old Evanston estates. I'd refused without much thought. The land was where Eleanor and I had built our life, where we'd raised our children. I wasn't selling it to be strip-mined. I researched their offer at your request, the mineral rights under your property. Harlan pointed to a highlighted figure on one of the documents. $28 million. The number didn't register at first. Too large, too impossible. 28 million, Iris's voice cracked. The deposits are extensive and accessible. The company's offer was legitimate. Harlan pulled out another document. Your estate inventory. The mansion 4.5 million. Life insurance 3 million. Investment account savings, other assets approximately 700,000. But with the mineral rights included. He wrote a number at the bottom of the page. $35,500,000. Dad, Iris stared at the figure. You never told me about the mining offer. I refused to sell. It's where your mother and I built our life. I didn't think—" My voice failed. I didn't think it mattered. I didn't think Brock knew. I didn't think my son would calculate the exact value of killing me. But Brock knew, Harlan said quietly. When he called in February, he asked specifically about mineral rights valuation. He knew about the mining offer. He knew what the estate was worth. At what dollar amount does a son decide his father's life is worth less than the land beneath his feet? Iris stood abruptly crossed to the window. Her shoulders shook. I wanted to go to her, but I couldn't move, couldn't process what Harlan was telling us. Brock hadn't acted on impulse, hadn't decided in a moment of desperation or greed. He'd researched guardianship procedures in February, calculated the value of the estate, planned exactly how to gain control of everything. Then in April, he'd walk through my door with Celeste carrying a water filtration system and organic tea and vitamins he swore would keep me healthy. Smiled while he unpacked them, squeezed my shoulder and told me my health was worth any cost. And I'd believed him. God help me, I'd been touched by his concern. There's one more thing, Harlan said. The mineral rights transfer. Under your current will, everything is divided equally between Iris and Brock. But if you were to die intestate without a will, or if the will was contested during an incapacity proceeding, Illinois law defaults to equal distribution among children unless one can prove primary caretaker status. Which Brock would claim, Iris said, turning from the window. He's been calling Dad every day, visiting regularly. He'd argue he was the devoted son managing Dad's care while I was 4 hours away. And if he had guardianship papers showing cognitive decline, Harlan nodded. He could contest any will as the product of incompetence, control everything during the proceedings, maybe even convince a judge to award him majority control for his caretaking role. The pieces locked into place with sickening clarity. I sat in Harlan's office staring at the mineral rights contract, while Iris's hand shook holding the guardianship inquiry notes. My son hadn't decided to kill me on impulse or in desperation. He'd researched, he'd planned, he'd calculated the exact value of my death months before he smiled and handed me that first cup of tea. But I still didn't know the most important thing. Was I already dying, or could I still save myself? I needed to know if it was too late, if the damage was irreversible, or if stopping now might save whatever was left of me. So I decided to become my own science experiment, even though the experiment might kill me. The morning after Harlan's revelation, I dumped the tea down the sink, watched 8 months of chamomile blend swirl down the drain in a gray-brown spiral. The vitamins went into a drawer in the guest bathroom where Brock would never look. Then I waited. Day 1 was hell. The nausea hit at 7 a.m. like it had every morning for months. My hand shook so badly I dropped a coffee mug. It shattered across the kitchen floor, and I stood there staring at the pieces, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. At 9 o'clock, Brock called. "Dad, did you have your tea this morning?" "Your vitamins." The lie came easier than it should have. "Yes, son. Every day, just like you said." "Good. You need to keep your strength up. I'll check in tomorrow." I spent most of day 1 in bed, shaking nauseous, convinced I'd die either way. But by evening, something shifted. The trembling eased slightly. I managed half a piece of toast without immediately vomiting. Day 2. The nausea came later. 10 a.m. instead of 7. Less intense. I ate scrambled eggs at noon and kept them down. The fog in my head cleared just enough to notice it had been there at all. Brock called at 9 sharp. "Dad, vitamins with breakfast, remember? And the tea works better on an empty stomach before bed." "I remember, son. You sound better today. See, I told you consistency was important." I hung up and stood in the kitchen staring at the cabinet where the tea used to be. My hands were steadier than they'd been in weeks. Day 3, I woke without nausea. No trembling, no immediate rush to the bathroom. I lay in bed testing the absence of symptoms the way you test a sore tooth with your tongue. The morning light through Eleanor's curtains looked sharper, clearer. I got up, showered without needing to sit down halfway through, dressed myself without fumbling the buttons. I ate a full breakfast, eggs, toast, fruit, kept it all down. At 9, Brock called. "Dad, you're taking everything right, the tea especially." "Every day, son." "Perfect, keep it up." That night I slept 6 straight hours, first time in 4 months. Stop drinking, feel better, resume drinking, feel worse. The equation was that simple, and that damning. But I needed absolute certainty. Scientific proof I could show Iris, show Harlan, show anyone who might doubt what my son was doing. So on day 4, I brewed a fresh cup of tea. The smell alone made my stomach clench. Sweet and earthy, the same scent that had filled my kitchen every evening for 8 months. I lifted the cup to my lips, thought of Brock's smile when he'd first given it to me, and drank. Within 2 hours, the nausea returned. Within 4, I was shaking again. By evening, I was bent over the toilet, heaving up everything I'd managed to eat that day. Irrefutable, undeniable, scientific certainty. My son was poisoning me, and I had proof written in my body's response. I dumped the tea again, hid the vitamins, tried to pretend normalcy while my insides twisted with something worse than nausea, the cold knowledge that Brock called every morning not to check on my health but to ensure I was taking the poison. 2 days later, Hazel Mercer saved my life for the second time. I'd gone to get the mail. Simple task: walk to the mailbox, collect the letters, walk back. Except somewhere between the porch and the gate, I forgot why I was outside. I stood at the mailbox with my hand on the latch, trying to remember. The afternoon sun felt too bright. A car passed on the street. I watched it go by and couldn't recall what I'd been about to do. How long I stood there, I don't know. Long enough for Hazel to notice from her kitchen window. Long enough for her to put down whatever she was doing and pick up her phone. She called Iris for the second time. "Iris, your father stood at his gate staring at nothing for 15 minutes today like he forgot why he went outside." Iris's response was defensive. "I learned this later during the police interviews. Hazel, my brother says the doctors found nothing wrong. He talks to Dad every day." "I don't care what your brother says." Hazel's voice went flat and hard, the tone she probably used on parents who insisted their child would never cheat. "I've been a teacher for 40 years. I know what forgetting looks like. I know what dying looks like. If you don't come now, you'll be planning a funeral soon." Sometimes the people who save your life aren't family. They're the ones who refuse to mind their own business. The silence on the line stretched long enough that Hazel thought she'd lost the connection. "Then I'll be there tonight." Iris hung up the phone, looked at her computer screen showing the deadline. She'd miss the meeting, she'd have to cancel the client who'd be angry. Then she grabbed her car keys. 4 hours separated her from Evanston. Her brother had been controlling the narrative for months, sending photos and updates and reassurances, building a wall between Iris and the truth. But Hazel Mercer had just handed her something more powerful than Brock's lies. Eyewitness proof that her father was dying. I eventually made it back inside with the mail, found myself in the kitchen with no memory of the walk from the mailbox. The afternoon blurred into evening. I ate crackers, kept them down, felt marginally more human. At 9 p.m., headlights swept across the living room windows. I wasn't expecting anyone. Brock had visited 3 days ago. Hazel usually called before stopping by. The car door slammed, footsteps on the porch fast and urgent. The front door opened. "Dad?" Iris's voice, but wrong, tight with something between fear and fury. She stepped into the living room where I sat with the television on but unwatched. The light behind her cast her face in shadow, but I saw the moment she registered what I looked like. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, Dad, what has he done to you?" The look on my daughter's face when she walked through my door at 11:30 that night told me I looked even worse than I felt. Iris stopped 3 steps into the living room, just froze there with her purse still over her shoulder, keys dangling from her hand, mouth opening and closing without sound. I'd forgotten what I looked like to someone who hadn't watched the decline day by day. who hadn't seen the gradual disappearance of flesh from bone, the slow graying of skin, the thinning of hair until scalp showed through in patches. I'd avoided mirrors for weeks, but Iris's face became a mirror I couldn't escape. "Dad," her voice came out strangled. "Oh my God, Dad." I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. I know how I look." She crossed the room in 2 strides, dropping to her knees in front of my chair. Her hands found mine, cold, trembling, skeletal. She held them like they might break.
"When?"
she whispered.
"When did it get this bad?"
"It's been gradual, 8 months maybe. The doctors..." "What doctors? What have they said?" "Nothing useful. Everything tests normal. They think it's grief, depression, age." The lie tasted bitter, even though I'd believed it myself for months. Iris's fingers traced the bones in my wrist. I watched her lawyer brain engage, saw the shift from shock to assessment. "You've lost weight. 35 pounds. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Jesus Christ. Dad, why didn't someone..." "Brock's been telling you I'm fine. He sent photos, recent ones, he said. You looked..." Her voice cracked. "They must have been old, from before." "Before I started dying, you mean?" The words hung between us. I'd never said it out loud before, never named what was happening with such brutal honesty. Iris stood abruptly, paced to the window, back to me, to the window again. Energy radiating off her in waves. "Can you tell me everything from the beginning, please?" So I told her. April's unexpected visit, the water purifier, the vitamins, the tea, Brock's daily phone calls checking if I'd taken them, the nausea that started in May, the weight loss, the 5 different doctors who found nothing wrong, Hazel catching me at the mailbox, Harlan's revelation about the February call. Iris listened without interrupting, but I watched her hands curl into fists. Then I told her about the experiment, the 3 days without tea, the improvement, the relapse when I drank it again. There's a specific kind of crying that happens when someone you love sees you dying and cannot hide the truth anymore. Iris didn't sob, didn't wail, just stood at Eleanor's window with tears streaming down her face in silence, shoulders shaking. When she finally turned back to me, her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "You're telling me Brock is poisoning you?" "Yes. For the estate. For $35 million. She absorbed the number without flinching. "The mineral rights. Harlan told you?" "He mentioned them. I didn't realize..." She crossed back to me, knelt again, took my hands again. "Dad, we need to call the police. And tell them what? That my son gives me tea that makes me sick when I drink it. That I'm dying, but 5 doctors say I'm fine. That he called a lawyer once to ask about guardianship. We have Harlan's notes, the February call. Proves Brock asked questions, doesn't prove he's poisoning me. We need evidence, real evidence, something that shows what's in the tea and vitamins, something that proves they're causing this." Iris was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Do you still have them? The tea, the vitamins?" "On it. I threw out most of the tea, but the vitamins are in the guest bathroom, hidden. We need to get them tested, find out what's actually in them. That takes time, labs, money, and if Brock finds out I've stopped taking them, if he realizes we know, then what will he do?" I met her eyes. "I don't know, but a man who'd spend 8 months slowly poisoning his father might do anything if he thought he was about to be caught." The house settled around us. Old boards creaking, wind against windows, the silence of a mansion built for a family that had broken apart in ways Eleanor and I never imagined. "Hazel saved your life, you know," Iris said finally. "If she hadn't called me the second time, if she hadn't been that insistent, I would have believed Brock. I wanted to believe him, that you were fine, that the neighbor was overreacting, that grief was making you imagine problems that didn't exist. I wanted to believe it too. How much time do we have? If you stop taking the tea and vitamins completely, will you recover?" "I don't know, maybe. The doctor said everything tested normal, so maybe the damage isn't permanent, or maybe it's too late and I'm dying anyway." I squeezed her hands. "But I'm not going to spend whatever time I have left drinking poison to make my son think he's winning. 35 pounds, 5 months, 3 doctors, 0 answers, until now. Iris's face hardened into an expression I'd seen before, the same look she got in the courtroom when she knew she had a winning case. We're going to stop him. However long it takes, whatever we have to do, we're going to prove what he's doing and make sure he pays for it. You sound very certain. I am certain, because you're not dying anymore, Dad. You're going to stop drinking the poison, start eating real food, and get strong enough to testify against him, and I'm going to help you do it. I looked at my daughter, red-eyed but not crying anymore, voice calm and steady, and realized what I should have known months ago. I didn't need to face this alone. Iris wasn't here to mourn me. She was here to fight. But before we could fight, we needed proof. Real scientific, irrefutable proof of what was in those vitamins and that tea. And unknown to either of us, someone had been carrying exactly that kind of evidence for 3 months. An hour after Iris arrived, someone knocked softly on the bedroom door upstairs. A knock too gentle to be my son. Iris had gone up to the guest room to unpack, and I dragged myself to bed exhausted from the emotional weight of the evening. But the knock brought us both back into the hallway, where we found Finn standing in the dim light, clutching a small canvas bag to his chest. 17 years old, tall but not yet filled out with Brock's dark hair and Eleanor's gray eyes, he looked terrified. "Aunt Iris," he whispered, glancing toward the stairs, as if his parents might materialize any second. "I have something for you. I should have given it to someone months ago." Iris guided him into the guest room, closed the door. "Finn, what is this?" He set the bag on the bed and unzipped it with shaking hands. Inside were 3 items each wrapped in plastic bags, the way someone might preserve evidence. A vitamin bottle, a sealed tea bag, what looked like part of a water filter. I saw Mom putting something in Grandpa's vitamins with a pipette. The words tumbled out fast, like he'd been rehearsing them for months. In August. I came to deliver them early, and she was in the kitchen alone, and I watched through the door gap, and she didn't know I was there. Iris picked up the vitamin bottle, held it to the light. "This is the one from the month before. I took it before she could throw it away. I thought I didn't know what to think, but I knew something was wrong." "Finn." I stepped into the room, steadied myself against the doorframe. "You've been carrying this since August." He nodded, tears tracking down his face. I didn't know what to do. Every time I tried to tell someone, I'd think about what it would mean, that my mom is that she's trying to kill me. I finished quietly. "I'm so sorry, Grandpa. I should have told you right away. I should have." "You told me when it mattered." I crossed to him, pulled him into a hug despite my shaking arms. "You called me that night in December. You warned me. You saved my life, Finn. 17 years old, choosing between silence that protects parents and truth that saves grandfather. No child should face that alone." Iris examined the tea bag. "This is from the original box, from July, before Grandpa started getting really sick." Finn wiped his eyes. "And the filter core is from the water system they installed. I thought maybe if everything was poisoned, maybe the water too." "Finn, you preserved evidence." Iris's lawyer voice kicked in sharp and focused. "This is exactly what we need. Lab analysis, toxicology reports. This proves—" "Nothing yet," I interrupted. "Not until we know what's in them, but it gives us something to test." We moved downstairs to the kitchen. Iris made coffee. Finn sat at the table where he'd eaten breakfast with his parents dozens of times, where Celeste had probably sat smiling after delivering poisoned vitamins. I spread Harlan's notes across the surface, added the evidence bags beside them. Midnight ticked into 1 a.m., then toward 2. 3 generations of Townsends piecing together 8 months of calculated murder. I described my experiment. 3 days without tea, dramatic improvement. 1 day back on tea, immediate relapse. Iris took notes in her legal pad the same way she probably documented client meetings. Iris showed Finn the papers from Harlan. The February call about guardianship procedures, the mineral rights valuation, the estate total that made murder worth the risk. Finn described what he'd seen through the kitchen door gap, his mother's careful precision, The glass pipette, the methodical drops onto each vitamin pill, the way she'd wiped everything clean before turning around. She was calm, Finn said. That's what scared me most. Not nervous or guilty, just calm, like she'd done it 100 times before. We drew a timeline on the back of Harlan's notes. February, Brock calls about guardianship. April, gifts delivered. May, symptoms begin. August, Finn witnesses tampering. November, Finn's midnight warning. December, this moment. 8 months of premeditation laid out in black ink across my kitchen table. The question, Iris said, finally setting down her pen, is whether we're dealing with one poisoner or two. We all knew what she meant. Grandpa, Finn's voice wavered. Does Dad know what Mom is putting in the vitamins? Timeline drawn, evidence bagged, truth spoken. One question remained. I thought about Brock's phone calls. Every morning at 9. Did you take your vitamins, Dad? Your tea, always checking, always confirming I'd taken the poison. But was he checking because he knew what was in them, or because Celeste had convinced him I needed them for my health? I don't know, I admitted. Your father called Harlan about guardianship in February. That's 2 months before the gifts arrived, which suggests planning. But Finn only saw Mom tampering, Iris countered. Not both of them. Dad calls every day asking if you took the vitamins, Finn said. He's always asking. Is that because he knows they're poison or because Mom told him they're medicine? There's another possibility, Iris said quietly. Celeste is the poisoner. Brock researched guardianship and asset transfer, maybe even suggested the gifts. But he doesn't know his wife is using his plan to actually kill you. He thinks you're just getting naturally sick, and when you're declared incompetent, he'll take control of the estate. Which makes him guilty of conspiracy, I said, but not attempted murder. Does that distinction matter? Finn looked between us. Either way, he wants Grandpa declared incompetent. Either way, he's trying to take the estate. It matters, Iris said, because it determines how we approach this. If Brock knows about the poisoning, we're fighting two enemies who are coordinating. If he doesn't know, then we might be able to turn him against her, I finished. Use his guilt or ignorance as leverage. Or, Finn said slowly, he might choose her over you. The silence that followed held the weight of every terrible possibility. We sat around that kitchen table until 2 a.m, 3 generations of Townsends united by poisoned tea and a 17-year-old's courage. But the most dangerous question hung in the air unanswered. Did my son know his wife was trying to kill me, or was he being manipulated by someone even more calculating than I'd imagined? The answer would determine whether we were fighting one enemy or two. We wouldn't get the answer about Brock from speculation. We'd get it from evidence. 48 hours after Finn handed us that bag, Dr. Edgar Sinclair called with results that turned suspicion into prosecutable evidence. Dr. Sinclair had spent 64 years on this earth and 40 of them analyzing toxins in an independent Chicago lab. Iris had found him through her legal network, someone with no connection to Brock or Celeste who could testify in court if needed. We met him at his laboratory on a gray December afternoon. He spread the analysis results across a metal table in a room that smelled like antiseptic and something sharper I couldn't identify. The vitamins. He began without preamble, pointing to a chemical breakdown that meant nothing to me, but everything to Iris. Contain a compound that mimics natural metabolic waste. It breaks down quickly in the bloodstream, which is why standard toxicology screens missed it. But it accumulates in liver and kidney tissue over time. How long would it take to kill someone? Iris asked, her lawyer voice steady even as her hand gripped mine under the table. Depends on dosage and body weight, given the concentration here and daily ingestion over 8 months. He looked at me over his glasses. You'd have maybe 4 to 6 more weeks before the organ damage became irreversible. Another 2 weeks after that before complete failure. I'd been 6 weeks from dying when Finn called. And the tea, Iris asked. That's the elegant part. Sinclair pulled out a second analysis. The tea itself isn't directly toxic. It contains natural enzymes from the chamomile and several other herbs. But these enzymes accelerate cellular absorption by approximately 40%. The silence that followed was heavy. You're saying the tea makes the vitamins work faster, I said. Precisely. Separately, either component is relatively subtle. The vitamins would take months longer without the tea. The tea alone does nothing harmful. But together they're a murder weapon, Iris finished. Sinclair nodded. Whoever designed this understood exactly what they were doing. This required research, knowledge of pharmacokinetics, planning. Vitamins slow death. Tea acceleration trigger. Together perfect crime. Almost. And the water filter, I asked. Completely clean, just an expensive filtration system, probably installed to establish credibility, make the health products seem part of a comprehensive wellness plan. We left with 3 copies of the analysis, one for us, one for Harlan, one for eventual law enforcement. Proof in black and white that my son's gifts were designed to kill me. But proof of what was in the products didn't prove who put it there. We needed to catch them in the act. The next morning, Iris installed 3 pinhole cameras throughout the mansion. She'd purchased them from a security supply store in Chicago, small enough to hide in smoke detectors and wall outlets. One in the kitchen angled toward the counter where Celeste usually worked. One in the living room covering my chair. One in the hallway between. Finn texted placement guidance from school. Mom stands left corner when preparing tea. Angle camera higher. She locks kitchen door when working. Iris adjusted the kitchen camera, tested the angle on her phone. The feed came through clear, showing every detail of the counter surface. That's when we heard the car in the driveway. Iris? I called from the living room window. Brock's here. Shit. She pocketed her phone, straightened the smoke detector that held the camera. He's not supposed to visit until Thursday. Well, he's here now. The doorbell rang. Iris shot me a look, remembered the performance, and went to answer it. Brock stood on the porch with a grocery bag, smiling. Hey, sis. Didn't know you'd be here. Just checking on Dad. Iris stepped aside to let him in, voice casual, despite the camera phone in her pocket actively transmitting 3 feeds. Took some personal time. That's great. Dad could use the company. He set the bag on the kitchen counter, the counter with a camera now watching every movement. Brought some groceries. Noticed he was low on a few things last time I visited. I stayed in my chair, performing weakness I no longer entirely felt. The nausea had eased significantly in the days since I'd stopped taking the poison. But Brock couldn't know that. He crossed to the living room, squeezed my shoulder. Dad, how are you feeling? Tired. Always tired these days. You're taking your vitamins every day, right? The tea. How do you sit across from your son asking if you took your poison today and smile like nothing's wrong? Every day, son. Good. You need to keep your strength up. He glanced at Iris, who'd followed him into the living room. Has he been eating okay? Better since I've been here, Iris said. I've been cooking. That's great. Brock checked his watch. I can't stay long. Early meeting tomorrow, just wanted to drop off the groceries, but call me if you need anything, okay? He left 20 minutes later. The second his car pulled away, Iris checked her phone. All 3 feeds recorded perfectly, she said, scrolling through footage. Kitchen camera caught him unpacking groceries. He didn't touch the vitamins or tea, just put away milk, bread, some vegetables. So either he doesn't know what Celeste is doing, I said, or he's careful not to tamper with anything when someone might notice. We'll know more on Friday. Finn's text had arrived an hour after Brock left. Mom and I coming Friday night. Dad has golf tournament, so it'll be just Mom. She's bringing fresh vitamins and tea. 3 days. We had 3 days to prepare for the moment we'd finally see exactly what Celeste was doing to me. 3 days to make sure every camera angle was perfect, every second recorded, every movement documented. 3 days until we'd have video evidence of attempted murder. Iris sat at the kitchen table reviewing camera feeds, making notes about angles and lighting. I watched her work with a strange mixture of pride and heartbreak. My daughter preparing to catch her sister-in-law poisoning her father. My grandson texting tactical information from high school between classes. My family broken into pieces and reassembling around evidence bags and hidden cameras. Friday night. Celeste would arrive with Finn, send him to watch television, and lock herself in my kitchen to prepare my weekly supply of poison. And for the first time, we'd have proof of every single thing she did. The 3 days passed in careful preparation. Iris tested camera angles. I practiced looking weak and compliant. Finn sent tactical updates about Celeste's routine, and Friday night arrived exactly as predicted. Iris and I sat in my darkened bedroom watching 3 phone screens as my daughter-in-law poisoned my vitamins in real time. The kitchen camera feed showed Celeste entering at 8 p.m. just after she'd sent Finn downstairs to watch television. She glanced around the empty room, then reached back and locked the door with a soft click we heard clearly through the audio. "She's locking the door," Iris whispered beside me, though we were alone on the second floor. "Shh, don't move, don't make a sound." Celeste set her designer handbag on the counter, the same counter where she'd unpacked healthy gifts 8 months ago, smiling about Brock's concern for my well-being. She removed a small, unlabeled bottled dark glass that could have held essential oils or vitamins or anything innocent. Then came the pipette, glass like the one Finn had described. She held it with the ease of long practice, drew liquid from the bottle with steady hands. No hesitation, no nervousness, just methodical efficiency. She opened my vitamin bottle, the one sitting in plain sight where any concerned daughter-in-law might leave weekly supplies for an aging father-in-law, laid the pills out in rows across the counter, 30 of them, 1 month supply, 3 drops per pill, left to right, top to bottom, systematic as someone checking items off a list. I counted under my breath. 90 drops total. 90 individual doses of whatever organ failure toxin Dr. Sinclair had identified in the lab analysis. There's something uniquely horrifying about watching someone you've known for 15 years methodically add poison to pills meant for you. 5 minutes total. That's all it took. 5 minutes to prepare a month's worth of death. She capped the vitamin bottle, shook it gently to distribute the liquid, wiped the pipette clean with a tissue from her pocket. Everything went back in her purse. She checked her reflection in the microwave door, adjusted her hair, smoothed her blouse. Unlocked the door. Walked out smiling. "Dad!" Iris's voice shook. "We got it. Every second, every movement." I couldn't speak. Couldn't process what I'd just watched. My son's wife, the woman who'd sat at my holiday dinners, who'd called me dad for 15 years, who'd kissed my cheek when she arrived tonight, methodically adding poison to vitamins with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this dozens of times before. "She's done this before," I finally managed. Look how fast she was. How calm. I know. Iris was already uploading the video to 3 different cloud services. This is prosecutable, clear intent, clear action, clear evidence. Downstairs I heard Celeste calling for Finn. "Sweetie, time to go. Grandpa needs his rest." We waited until their car pulled away, then waited another 30 minutes to be sure they weren't coming back. Only then did we go downstairs to the kitchen where the poisoned vitamins sat exactly where Celeste had left them. Iris photographed everything before sealing the bottle in an evidence bag. "Don't touch it," she said unnecessarily. "We need chain of custody perfect when we turn this over to police." 2 days later, Sunday afternoon, Finn's text arrived. "Urgent. Listen to this now." The audio file was 6 minutes long. Background noise suggested he'd recorded it from a hallway or behind a partially closed door. His mother's voice came through clearly. "Next week will work perfectly. He can barely stand now." A man's voice responded, older professional. "And the cognitive assessment, the certificate just needs your signature confirming cognitive decline. We have documentation of the weight loss, the confusion, the witness statements from neighbors about erratic behavior." The signing ceremony. Thursday, 2 p.m. "I've already told my husband the paperwork is routine estate management. He thinks we're protecting family assets in case his father develops dementia. He doesn't realize we're taking everything. My hands clenched around Iris's phone as I listened. And after, the man asked. After the signing, Celeste's laugh was soft, almost amused. Frankly, whether the old man lives or dies becomes irrelevant at that point. Once we have legal guardianship and the property transfers are filed, his signature becomes invalid anyway. Your husband is comfortable with this approach. My husband, Celeste said, her voice hardening, is comfortable with whatever I tell him to be comfortable with. He's wanted this estate for years. I'm simply helping him get it. Video evidence, audio confession, timeline proof, game over. Iris had the phone, now listening to the recording for the third time, making notes in her legal pad. She mentions a fake doctor, a forged certificate, a signing ceremony planned for Thursday. That's 5 days from now. She's planning to have me declared incompetent, I said. Transfer everything before I can stop her. Then whether the poison finishes me or not doesn't matter because legally I'll have no control over my own assets. We need to contact police now, tonight, and tell them that my daughter-in-law poisoned vitamins, and we have video proof that my grandson recorded her discussing guardianship fraud. Yes, exactly that. Iris was scrolling through contacts on her phone. We have video of attempted murder, audio of conspiracy to commit fraud, toxicology reports, Finn's eyewitness testimony from August, Harlan's notes about February's guardianship inquiry. Dad, we have enough to arrest her tonight. I sat holding Iris's phone, listening to my daughter-in-law casually discuss whether I'd be alive or dead after she stole my property. Iris was already scrolling through her contacts, finger hovering over the number for law enforcement. She looked up at me with eyes that had moved past shock into something harder. Dad, we end this now, tonight? But something still nagged at me. Something about Brock's voice in that recording. Celeste had said he was comfortable with whatever she told him to be comfortable with, that he'd wanted this estate for years. We had video, audio, and a 17-year-old witness proving Celeste was a murderer. But we still didn't understand why my son hated me enough to let her do it. Understanding Brock's motivation wouldn't change the evidence or what we had to do. But I needed to know why. Why my son had let his wife poison me for 8 months without a word of protest. The call from Harlan came the next morning with words that broke something in me that even poison couldn't touch. Alvin, I need you and Iris to come to my office. I found something in your old files, something I think explains a lot about Brock. We drove to Chicago through December sleet. Iris drove because my hands still shook occasionally, muscle memory from months of toxin accumulation. She didn't ask what Harlan had found. Neither of us speculated. We just drove in silence through gray morning light. Harlan's office smelled like old paper and coffee. He'd spread documents across his conference table before we arrived. Hospital bills, property deeds, yellowed papers that looked older than Finn. These are from 1993, Harlan said without preamble. Your wife's cancer treatment at Northwestern Memorial Cancer Center. I stared at Eleanor's name on the invoices. 30 years dead and still reaching from the grave to explain why our son wanted me in one beside her. I remember, I said quietly. Stage 4 ovarian. They gave her 6 months. She fought for 18. The bills, Harlan continued, pointing to a ledger sheet with his pen, came to $180,000 after insurance, experimental treatments, clinical trials, surgical interventions that weren't covered. Iris leaned closer. Dad, how did you pay for this? Harlan pulled out another document. Property sale agreement dated August 1993. The commercial parcel near the highway that Eleanor and I had bought as an investment in the 80s. Sold to a development company for $230,000. You sold the land, Iris said slowly. I sold the land to save your mother. The words came out hollow. We'd planned to build rental properties on it. Retirement income. But when the bills started coming and insurance denied half the treatments, I stopped. The memory of that summer still hurt. 12-year-old Brock asking why Mom had to stay in the hospital so much. 6-year-old Iris, too young to understand why mommy was so tired. Me signing over property deeds with hands that shook just like they'd shake again 30 years later from poison my son provided.
"Why didn't you tell us?" Iris asked. "Because you were children, and I didn't want you growing up feeling responsible for your mother's medical bills. I wanted you to remember her fighting to stay alive, not what it cost." Harlan pulled out a third document, a letter addressed to him dated December 1993. Eleanor's handwriting shaky but legible. "She wrote this 3 months before she died," Harlan said. "Asked me to keep it sealed unless it ever became relevant to estate matters. I just opened it yesterday." He handed it to me. I recognized Eleanor's voice immediately. "Dear Harlan," the letter began. "If you're reading this, something has gone wrong with my family. Alvin sold the investment property to save my life. He made me promise never to tell Brock he didn't want our son carrying guilt about his mother's illness. But I worry that silence will cause problems. Brock overheard neighbors talking about the sale. He asked me why Daddy sold the land. I couldn't tell him the truth without breaking Alvin's wishes. So I said nothing. I see the way our son looks at his father now, like something broke between them that I can't fix. Please, if this wound ever festers into something worse, tell him the truth. Tell him his father chose love, not money." "How do you explain to your daughter that your son has hated you for 30 years for an act of love he never knew about?" "Brock knew about the sale," Iris said, reading over my shoulder. "But he never knew you sold it to pay for Mom's treatment." "He was 12, I said. "He heard neighbors gossiping about the property sale. Probably heard them speculating about money problems or investment decisions. And when Eleanor died anyway 3 months later." "He thought you abandoned her financially," Harlan finished. "That you sold valuable land while she was dying instead of using it to save her." The room tilted slightly. 30 years of distance between my son and me. 30 years of cold interactions and minimal contact. 30 years of wondering what I'd done wrong as a father, all because I'd tried to protect him from guilt. "When did Celeste find out?" Iris asked. Harlan pulled out one more document. Printout from a social media conversation dated 7 years ago, just before Brock and Celeste's wedding. Brock posted something about childhood memories. Someone commented asking about the land sale. Brock responded publicly that his father sold family assets while his mother was dying. Celeste would have seen this. She would have understood immediately that she'd found a wound she could exploit. I read Brock's words from 7 years ago. "My father sold the only investment property we had while my mother was in the hospital. 3 months later, she was dead. I'll never understand how he could choose money over trying to save her." The cruelest weapon isn't poison, it's taking someone's grief and twisting it into hatred. "She didn't create his resentment," Iris said quietly. "She just weaponized it. Made him believe you were the kind of man who'd abandon his dying wife for profit. So when she suggested taking your estate now..." "He thought he was claiming what I owed his mother," I finished. "Justice for the woman I supposedly failed to save." Harlan gathered the documents carefully. "Celeste is a manipulator. She found your son's wound, poured salt in it for years, then convinced him that poisoning you was righteous revenge for his mother's death." "Does it change anything?" Iris asked. "Does knowing this change what we have to do?" I looked at Eleanor's letter, her handwriting wavering across the page as cancer ate her strength but not her clarity. She'd known. She'd seen what my silence was doing to Brock and tried to warn me from beyond the grave. I sat in Harlan's office, staring at hospital bills older than Finn, understanding for the first time why my son looked at me with such cold hatred. I'd kept silent to protect him from guilt. That silence had given Celeste exactly what she needed to turn him into a murderer. But knowing why he hated me didn't change what we had to do next. What we had to do next started with evidence.
3 days after learning the truth about my son's hatred, I was organizing my filing cabinet when I found the receipt that proved how carefully he'd planned my death. The home office had always been Eleanor's space. She'd kept meticulous files, warranties, receipts, tax documents going back decades. After she died, I'd maintained the system out of habit more than necessity. Now reorganizing files to give Iris access to everything we might need for the legal case, I found the appliance folder. Water purifier, premium filtration system. The receipt was stapled to the warranty card. Purchase date, February 15th, 2023. I stared at those numbers. February 15th, 10 months ago. 2 full months before Brock walked through my door in April with that system in hand, claiming it was a spontaneous gesture of concern. He'd bought it in February. The same month he called Harlan asking about guardianship procedures. The same month Eleanor's letter warned would be when the planning began. He bought it, he waited, he planned every step. The water filtration system hadn't been last-minute thoughtfulness. It had been a prop purchased and held in storage for 2 months, waiting for the right moment to introduce it as part of the caring son performance. I placed the receipt in an evidence envelope, wrote number 7 on the label, added it to the box Iris was assembling with everything else: toxicology reports, video footage, audio recordings, hospital bills from 1993, Harlan's notes. 7 pieces of evidence, 7 months of poisoning, 7 words from Finn that saved my life. February receipt, April arrival, 8 months planning, 2 months holding the weapon. That evening, we met Detective Marlene Garrett at Evanston Police Department. 47, with steel gray hair and the sharp eyes of someone who'd worked elder abuse cases for 12 years. She'd told Iris on the phone that she knew immediately this wasn't mere exploitation. This was attempted murder. Now she stood in a conference room with everything spread across the table like pieces of a puzzle that finally made sense. Video evidence. She pointed to screenshots from Friday night's camera feed. Celeste with the pipette, methodical and calm. Audio evidence. Finn's recording of the phone call discussing guardianship fraud. Toxicology. Dr. Sinclair's analysis proving the vitamins and tea worked synergistically. Timeline. Harlan's note showing 8 months of planning since February. And this, I handed her the water filter receipt. Garrett examined it, then looked at me. He purchased this 2 months before giving it to you, as part of the setup, to establish credibility for the wellness products that came later. Premeditation. She set the receipt down carefully. This moves it from opportunistic crime to calculated murder for profit. First-degree attempted murder under Illinois law. Iris leaned forward. So we have enough to arrest them. Almost. Garrett pulled out 2 draft arrest warrants already prepared but not yet signed. This is attempted murder, not elder abuse or exploitation. We have video of Celeste poisoning the vitamins. We have audio of her discussing the guardianship fraud. We have toxicology proving the poison and timeline proving premeditation. Then what's missing? I asked. Before I tell you what Detective Garrett explained next, are you still with me? Comment either A if you think Brock knew about the poison, or B if you think Celeste manipulated him, and add 1 short reason why. Quick note, what follows includes some recreated details for storytelling purposes, but the core lesson is what matters. The final act, Garrett said. They need to show up with guardianship papers and attempt to make you sign. That's when their intent becomes complete and prosecutable. Right now, a defense attorney could argue Celeste was just tampering with vitamins without proving she intended to use them to gain legal control of your estate. But if they show up with the paperwork, then we have them for the complete crime. Poisoning with intent to incapacitate, fraudulent guardianship to steal assets, conspiracy to commit murder, everything. Harlan, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. The signing ceremony Celeste mentioned in that recording. When is it scheduled? We don't know yet, Iris said, but based on her timeline, it should be soon. Garrett nodded. The warrants are ready. The moment they try to make you sign those papers, we move.
I'll have officers positioned nearby ready to respond immediately. And Brock, I asked, he's being manipulated by Celeste weaponizing his grief over his mother. He called about guardianship in February. Garrett interrupted gently. He brought you poisoned products in April. He called every morning for 8 months to confirm you were taking them. Even if Celeste is the primary actor, your son participated. The law doesn't distinguish between the person who adds poison and the person who ensures it's consumed. We'd built the trap piece by piece, now we just needed them to step inside. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Garrett explained procedures, evidence chain custody, witness testimony requirements. Finn would need to testify about what he saw in August. I'd need to testify about the daily phone calls, the gifts, the 8 months of illness. I was walking to my car when my phone buzzed with a text from Brock. Dad, Celeste and I want to come by this Saturday. There's something important we need to discuss about your future care. I stared at the message. Saturday was 4 days away. Future care was code for guardianship papers. Detective Garrett's prediction had been exactly right. I forwarded the text to Iris and Garrett. Within minutes, both responded. Iris, this is it, the signing ceremony. Garrett. Saturday at 2 p.m. I'll have units positioned within 2 minutes of your residence. The moment they produce guardianship papers, signal us and we move. 4 days. I had 4 days to prepare for the moment my son would try to steal my life, not knowing that every piece of evidence, every camera, every witness was already in place. 4 days until I watched him realize that the father he'd underestimated for 30 years had been 3 steps ahead all along. Those 4 days between Wednesday's text and Saturday's trap were the longest of my life. Between Wednesday's text and Saturday's trap, we had 4 days to prepare for the moment my son would try to make me sign away my life. Wednesday morning, Harlan called with the final piece. I found your doctor, he said. The one from Celeste's phone recording. I met him at his office that afternoon. Iris drove because I was supposed to be too weak to manage it myself. Maintaining the performance even when no one was watching had become second nature. Harlan spread printouts across his desk, medical board records, news articles, court documents from Georgia. Dr. Marcus Whitmore lost his medical license 4 years ago in Georgia for signing falsified psychiatric capacity assessments in a property fraud case. 3 elderly victims had their estates stolen after he certified them mentally incompetent. He wasn't incompetent, he was paid. Professional liar, Iris said, reading over my shoulder. Exactly. He's operating under a different name in Illinois now. Still signs capacity assessments for anyone willing to pay. $5,000 per signature according to the complaint that got him delicensed. I stared at the photo. Ordinary-looking man, late 50s, the kind of face you'd forget immediately. The kind of face that could walk into a signing ceremony and certify cognitive impairment without anyone questioning his credentials. Celeste didn't hire a doctor, I said. She hired someone who'd sign anything for money. Detective Garrett needs to know about this immediately, Iris said, already pulling out her phone. By Thursday, Garrett had confirmed Whitmore's current location and prepared a 3rd arrest warrant. Brock, Celeste, and now their paid accomplice. All the pieces were in place. All I had to do was survive until Saturday. Thursday morning, Brock called at 9 a.m. as usual. Dad, how are you feeling today? Did you take your vitamins? I let my voice shake. I think so. What day is it? Thursday, Dad. It's Thursday. Are you eating okay? Tired, so tired. We'll be there Saturday to help you with some paperwork. Just routine things. Nothing to worry about. After he hung up, I poured the morning tea into the potted plant by the window, dumped the vitamins in the trash, made myself breakfast, and ate every bite. For 4 days, I played the part of a dying man while planning the resurrection that would destroy my son. Friday afternoon, Celeste visited. I heard her car in the driveway and immediately positioned myself in my chair, blanket over lap, remote control clutched in trembling hands. By the time she knocked, I'd achieved the perfect glazed expression of someone losing cognitive function. Alvin. She let herself in with the key Brock had given her months ago. It's Celeste. I brought you some fresh tea. I blinked slowly as if struggling to place her face. Oh, honey. She crossed to my chair, all concern and gentleness. You're not looking well. Have you been taking your vitamins? Pills, yes, blue bottle. That's right, the blue bottle. She patted my hand. Tomorrow, Brock and I are coming by with some papers for you to sign. Just routine estate management, nothing complicated. You won't even need to read it all. We'll help you. I let my head nod forward slightly as if the conversation exhausted me. Good. She stood satisfied. Rest now. Tomorrow will be an important day. She left the fresh tea on the table beside me. I waited until her car pulled away, then poured it down the sink. Friday night, 11 p.m. I sat alone in my study with Eleanor's keepsake box. I hadn't opened it since Harlan showed me her letter to him. But there were other letters inside, other documents, other pieces of the woman I'd loved for 40 years. I lifted out the photo albums, the certificates, the pressed flowers from our wedding. At the bottom was a sealed envelope addressed to me in her handwriting. My hands shook not from poison this time, but from 30 years of wondering what she'd wanted to tell me. I opened it carefully. My dearest Alvin, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you've opened the box I asked you to leave sealed. I'm sorry for that. I know how hard it is to live with secrets. Please don't tell Brock that the land sale money paid for my hospital bills. I see the way he looks at you now after overhearing the neighbors. He thinks you chose money over me. Let him think that. It's better than him knowing the truth. If he learns you sold our retirement investment to buy me 6 more months of life, he'll carry that guilt forever. He'll spend his whole life trying to pay back a debt that was never his to owe. He'll look at every dollar and think, this could have saved my mother. I don't want that for our son. I want him to remember me fighting, not what it cost. I want him to be angry at cancer, not grateful to you for sacrificing our future. Anger is clean. Gratitude for this would poison him. So please, my love, keep this secret. Let him be angry at you if he needs to be. Let him think you were weak or selfish. It's a burden I'm asking you to carry, and I'm sorry for that. But it's lighter than the burden he'd carry knowing the truth. Love him for both of us, Eleanor. The cruelest irony, I'd kept a promise to protect my son, and that protection had nearly killed me. I sat in the study for a long time, letter in my lap, understanding for the first time the complete picture. Eleanor had seen the wound forming in our 12-year-old son. She'd tried to contain it by asking me to keep silent. We'd both thought silence was protection. We'd both been wrong. Celeste had found that wound, poured salt in it for 7 years of marriage, then convinced Brock that stealing my estate was justice for the mother I'd supposedly failed to save. I folded Eleanor's letter carefully and placed it in my breast pocket next to my heart, where it would stay until the moment I handed it to my son in handcuffs. Outside my study window, dawn was breaking on Saturday morning. 6 hours from now, Brock and Celeste would walk through my door with papers designed to steal my life. 6 hours from now, they'd discover the dying man in the chair was 3 steps ahead of them all along. I'd be ready. Saturday morning arrived with December sunshine and Eleanor's letter pressed against my heart. I dressed carefully, slowly, like a man who could barely manage buttons, positioned myself in my living room chair under a blanket, practiced the tremor in my hands one last time. They arrived at exactly 10 o'clock, just as Celeste had always planned, carrying the papers that would make me legally incompetent and them legally rich. The doorbell rang. I called out in a weak voice, "It's open." Brock entered first, carrying a leather portfolio. Then Celeste, perfectly styled in business casual attire. Finally, a man I'd never met, but whose face I recognized from Harlan's investigation, Dr. Marcus Whitmore, the professional liar who'd sign anything for $5,000. "Dad." Brock crossed to my chair, squeezed my shoulder. His hand felt warm through my shirt. For a moment I remembered when he was 12 and that hand was small and reached for mine crossing streets. "How are you feeling?" I blinked slowly as if struggling to process the question. Tired, always tired. We brought Dr. Whitmore to help evaluate your care needs. Brock gestured to the stranger. He's going to make sure you're getting everything you need. Whitmore stepped forward with practiced bedside manner. Mr. Townsend, I'm Dr. Whitmore. I specialize in care assessment for seniors. This is just a friendly visit to discuss your well-being. Celeste was already arranging the coffee table, moving my remote control and medications aside to make space for paperwork. She worked with the efficiency of someone who'd rehearsed this moment many times. The paperwork is simple, Dad, Brock said, settling onto the couch beside Celeste. Just routine legal matters to ensure you're properly cared for as you age. Nothing complicated. Whitmore pulled out documents from the portfolio. Thick packet, professionally bound dents with legal terminology. He spread them across the cleared table with the reverence of someone handling something important. This is a comprehensive care and guardianship agreement, Whitmore explained in soothing tones. It designates your son Brock as your legal guardian for financial and medical decisions. Standard procedure when someone's health is declining. I leaned forward slightly, squinting at the papers as if my eyes couldn't focus properly. What does it say? Celeste's voice was honey-sweet. It just gives Brock authority to help manage things you might find overwhelming. Bill payments, medical appointments, property maintenance, all the stressful things you shouldn't have to worry about. You'll receive the best care possible, Brock added. We promise. We just need your signature here and here and here. He pointed to lines highlighted in yellow. I watched him point to each line. My son's fingers steady and certain, marking the places where my life would end and his control would begin. $28 million in mineral rights, $4.5 million in property, $3 million in insurance, all transferring with one signature. The papers were comprehensive in ways I'd expected, but seeing it laid out was still stunning. Financial decision rights, complete control over all bank accounts, investments, assets, property sale authority, ability to sell the mansion, the land, everything Eleanor and I had built. Medical proxy power to make healthcare decisions, including end-of-life care. Legal representation, transfer right to hire attorneys on my behalf, settle lawsuits, sign contracts. Every aspect of my life bound in a neat packet waiting for my trembling signature to make Brock the owner of my existence. There's also a care facility clause, Whitmore said, flipping to page 7. If your condition deteriorates, this authorizes placement in an assisted living facility appropriate to your needs. Translation, once they had guardianship, they could institutionalize me, lock me away where I couldn't contest what they were doing with my property. 2 blocks away, Detective Garrett sat in an unmarked car with 2 officers waiting for my signal. Iris was parked on the next street over with Finn and Harlan. Everyone in position, everyone ready. All I had to do was give them enough evidence to make the arrest stick. Dr. Whitmore will witness your signature, Celeste said, handing me an expensive pen. That makes it legally binding. Then we can get you the care and support you deserve. Brock met my eyes. For just a moment, I saw something complicated there. Not quite guilt, but not quite the cold calculation Celeste carried. Something caught between the boy who'd loved his mother and the man who believed his father had failed her. Dad, he said quietly, this is for your own good. You're not well. You haven't been well for months. Let us help you. There's a specific moment when you stop being the victim and become the witness to your own resurrection. I took the pen in my trembling hand. Let them watch as I positioned it over the first signature line. The room held its breath. Brock leaning forward, Celeste perfectly still, Whitmore ready with his witness signature. The pen hovered over the paper. My hand shook exactly as it had for 8 months. Then I set the pen down. The trembling stopped. I looked up at my son, and when I spoke, my voice was suddenly clear and steady and stronger than it had been in 8 months. Before I sign, I said, each word precise and controlled, I want to ask you one question. Brock's face went still. Celeste's perfection cracked for just a second, a flicker of something like alarm crossing her features before she smoothed it away. Dad, Brock's voice carried uncertainty now. Just one question, son. I met his eyes directly. Let him see that the fog was gone, the confusion was gone, the dying man was gone, and I want you to answer honestly. The silence in that room was absolute. Outside birds sang. Inside, 3 people who'd planned to steal my life suddenly realized the script had changed. And I was the one holding the pen. The question I wanted to ask could wait, because I stood up from that armchair for the first time in 8 months, without trembling, without weakness, and watched my son's face realize everything he thought he knew was wrong. Dad, Brock's voice caught. What? I walked to the living room door with steady gait. No shuffle, no weakness, just a 69-year-old man who'd been 3 steps ahead all along. I opened the door wide. Iris entered first, her lawyer bearing evident in every line of her posture. Then Finn, 17 years old and carrying the courage it took to betray his parents to save his grandfather. Finally, Harlan with his briefcase full of documents that would end my son's freedom. They took positions around the room, Iris by the window, Finn near the hallway, Harlan beside me. A semicircle of witnesses and prosecutors surrounding 3 people who'd thought they were minutes away from stealing everything. Brock stood abruptly. What is this, Dad? What's going on? What's going on? I said, voice still clear and strong and steady. Is that I know exactly what you and your wife have been doing for 8 months. Celeste's expression flickered just for a second before settling back into perfect composure. But I'd seen it. The moment she realized the dying man had been a performance. Brock looked between me and Iris, confusion genuine on his face. Dad, I don't understand. We're here to help you. Help me. I stepped closer. Do you really think I wouldn't find out that you've been poisoning me? The word landed like a grenade. Brock's face went white. Poisoning, Dad, no. I would never. Sit down, Iris said, her lawyer voice cutting through his protests. All of you, sit down and be quiet. Dr. Whitmore, who'd been edging toward the door, froze. There's a specific kind of silence that happens when people realize the victim wasn't dying, he was watching. Harlan opened his briefcase. Iris moved to the coffee table, clearing away the guardianship papers like they were trash, which they were. Let me show you what we have, I said. First document, Dr. Sinclair's toxicology report. I set it on the table with deliberate care. This is the analysis of the vitamins you brought me in April, the ones Celeste prepared weekly, the ones you called every morning to make sure I was taking. I looked at Brock. They contain organ failure toxins, specifically designed to accumulate slowly in liver and kidney tissue, undetectable by standard blood tests because they break down quickly in the bloodstream. Brock stared at the report. That's impossible. The vitamins were poisoned, I finished. And the tea you brought, it contains enzymes that accelerate absorption by 40%, separately subtle, together lethal. Second document, video stills. Iris laid them out in sequence. Celeste in my kitchen, door locked, pipette in hand, adding drops to each vitamin pill with methodical precision. This is video from 2 weeks ago. Time-stamped, dated, complete footage available. Celeste looked at the images without expression, just studied them like she was reviewing someone else's work. Brock's hand went to his mouth. Celeste, she said nothing. Third document, transcript of Finn's audio recording. I handed it directly to Brock. This is your wife discussing the guardianship signing ceremony. Listen to what she says. Next week will work perfectly. He can barely stand now. After the signing, whether the old man lives or dies becomes irrelevant. Brock read the transcript. His hands started shaking. When was this recorded? Sunday, Finn said quietly from his position near the hallway. You were at your golf tournament. Mom thought I was at a friend's house. Brock looked at his son like he'd never seen him before. Fourth document, water filter receipt. I placed it face up. Purchase date February 15th, 2 months before you brought it to me claiming spontaneous concern. You bought the props in advance, Brock, held them for 2 months. This wasn't impulse, this was premeditation. Fifth document, Harlan's notes from the phone call. February 15th, you also called our family attorney asking about guardianship procedures for cognitively impaired parents. You researched how to have me declared incompetent before you ever brought me the first poisoned gift. Video, audio, toxicology, timeline, witness, motive, intent, done. Dr. Whitmore stood. I didn't know about any of this. I was just hired to sign papers. Sit down, Iris said coldly. We know exactly who you are, Dr. Whitmore, or should I say, former Dr. Whitmore, since you lost your Georgia medical license for signing falsified psychiatric assessments in a property fraud case. She placed his license revocation documents on the table. You're a professional witness for hire, $5,000 per signature. Celeste hired you specifically because you'd certify cognitive impairment without actually examining me. Whitmore sat. Brock was shaking now, holding the audio transcript like it might explain something that couldn't be explained. He turned to Celeste. Tell me this isn't real. Tell me you didn't... Didn't what? Her voice was calm, too calm. Didn't help you plan to take your father's estate. Didn't support your guardianship scheme. I never... Brock's voice cracked. I wasn't trying to hurt him. I just wanted... What did you want, Brock? I asked quietly. He looked at me with eyes that suddenly looked 12 years old again. I wanted what you owed Mom, what you should have given her, the land money, the treatment money, everything you refused to spend when she was dying. And there it was, the wound that had festered for 30 years. I reached into my breast pocket, pulled out Eleanor's letter, held it toward him. Before we go any further, you need to read this. Your mother wrote it before she died. She asked me never to tell you something. I kept that promise for 30 years. But Celeste was faster. She looked at all the evidence spread across the table, then sighed softly as if disappointed by an amateur mistake. She turned to Brock with eyes that held no love, no partnership, nothing but cold calculation. You're the one who called the lawyer 8 months ago, she said quietly. You brought the tea and vitamins, you monitored him daily, you controlled all communication with your sister, she gestured gracefully, dismissively. And me, I'm just your wife who did what you told me to do. The room went absolutely still. Then Celeste smiled, just slightly, just enough. Check your phone, Brock. Brock's hand moved to his phone like it might bite him. Check my phone. What are you talking about? Your messages. Celeste's voice remained perfectly calm. The ones you sent me about your father. The ones where you discussed every detail of this plan. I never... But he was already unlocking the screen fingers, fumbling. I watched my son's face drain of color as he scrolled. Watched his expression shift from confusion to horror to something that looked like drowning. No. The word came out strangled. No, I didn't write these. I never... He looked up at Celeste with the expression of a man watching his world disintegrate in real time. Show us, Iris said, her lawyer voice cutting through his panic. Brock's hands shook so violently the phone screen blurred as he held it out. Harlan took it carefully, like it was evidence, which it was. The messages were organized in a thread labeled estate planning. Dozens of texts, all time-stamped over the past 6 months, all apparently from Brock's phone to Celeste's. Harlan read aloud, his voice flat and professional. March 15th. The vitamins arrived. Make sure the dosage is subtle. We can't afford obvious symptoms. March 23rd. Dad's showing weakness already. Increased to 3 drops per pill. April 2nd. Tea working as accelerant. His hands shake during dinner. Finn's face had gone pale. Iris was taking notes. I just stood there watching my son realize what his wife had done to him. Harlan continued scrolling. May 18th. The old man's getting suspicious. Need to increase dosage. 2 more weeks max. June 3rd. Called attorney today. Guardianship process takes 60 days minimum. Start preparing certificate. Brock's legs gave out. He sank onto the couch, gasping like someone had punched him in the stomach. I didn't write those, he managed. I swear to God, I never wrote those. I didn't even know... Didn't know... Celeste's eyebrow raised delicately. Brock, they're on your phone. Sent from your device to my number. You're the one who wanted this. I was just supporting my husband.
Harlan was already examining the phone with the focus he'd probably used investigating corporate fraud for 2 decades. His fingers moved quickly, accessing settings I didn't understand.
Finn, he said without looking up, read the last message dated.
Finn leaned over his shoulder. His voice shook, reading his father's words, or what appeared to be his father's words.
December 10th. Signing ceremony set for Saturday. After he signs, inheritance timeline accelerates regardless of how long he lives. Certificate ready, doctor paid, everything in place.
The hands. That's what I remember most clearly. Brock's hands trembling so violently the wedding ring on his finger caught the light and scattered it like something broken. The small gasping sounds he made trying to breathe through the realization that his wife had framed him perfectly. The way he looked at Celeste like she was a stranger wearing his wife's face.
Pulls you into the visceral collapse moment, doesn't it? Watching a man realize everything he believed was a lie. Harlan set the phone down carefully. These messages weren't composed on this device. Brock looked up. What?
The metadata. Harlan pointed to information on the screen I couldn't interpret. Every text message has origin data showing which device composed it and when. These messages show a different device signature. They were written on another phone then planted on yours, remotely most likely. Probably 2 weeks ago based on the timestamp patterns.
The room went absolutely silent. Brock turned to Celeste. His voice came out broken. You did this. You put these on my phone.
I did what I had to do. Her voice remained calm, almost pitying. You involved me in this, Brock. You wanted your father's estate. You called the lawyer. You brought the products. You needed someone to share the risk, and you needed insurance in case something went wrong.
Insurance, Brock's voice cracked. You framed me. You've been planning to throw me under.
I was planning for every scenario. She smoothed her skirt with perfect composure.
That's what makes me good at what I do. Your father isn't stupid, Brock. I knew eventually he might figure something out, and when he did, I needed to make sure the evidence pointed in the right direction.
The right direction being me, Brock whispered.
I looked at Celeste's face and saw it clearly for the first time. No anger, no fear, no guilt, just cold calculation, like she was solving a math problem, like she'd been playing chess while everyone else played checkers. She'd prepared for every scenario, including the one where she sacrificed her own husband. The true mastermind had been hiding in plain sight all along.
Why? Brock asked, and the word held 30 years of pain. Why did you do this? I loved you. I trusted.
I know you did.
Celeste almost smiled.
You've always been the most trusting person I've met, Brock. It's one of the things I counted on.
The knock on the door came exactly then. Sharp, official, 3 deliberate raps. Detective Garrett's voice carried through from outside. Evanston Police, we received a call about a domestic disturbance. The room froze. Iris had made the call 5 minutes ago when Brock arrived, when he'd crossed the threshold with fraudulent guardianship papers and a fake doctor. Attempted fraud, attempted murder conspiracy. All the pieces Detective Garrett needed to make the arrests stick. But now the police were at my door, and Celeste had just framed my son perfectly with messages that looked real enough to convince anyone who didn't examine the metadata.
Harlan held up the phone. I have the forensics proving these are forged.
Celeste smiled, just slightly. And I have months of my husband's phone calls checking on his father's poison consumption. I have his February call to the lawyer. I have his purchase of the water filter in advance. I'm just the wife who did what she was told. The knock came again, louder. Who would the police believe, the metadata evidence proving forgery or Celeste's perfect performance? I open the door myself. The door swings open and 3 badges fill the frame. Detective Marlene Garrett stood between 2 uniformed officers, 1 male, 1 female, both young enough to be Brock's children. Garrett's eyes swept the room, taking in everything at once. The evidence spread across the table. Brock on the couch, face destroyed, Celeste standing perfectly composed, Dr. Whitmore trying to disappear into the corner.
Mr. Townsend.
Garrett stepped inside. We received your daughter's call. She indicated you had evidence of attempted murder.
Harlan was already moving phone in one hand, toxicology report in the other. Detective, I'm Harlan Bentley, family attorney. I have digital forensic evidence, toxicology analysis, and video documentation. He spread it across the table with the efficiency of someone who'd testified in court 100 times. This phone contains text messages appearing to detail a murder conspiracy. Metadata shows all messages were composed on a different device and remotely planted on this phone approximately 2 weeks ago. He pointed to Brock's phone, then to Celeste. The origin device matches her number. Garrett picked up the phone, examined the screen. Her expression never changed, but I saw her eyes narrow slightly as she read. This is Dr. Edgar Sinclair's toxicology analysis. Harlan continued, showing organ failure compounds in vitamins provided to Mr. Townsend by his son and daughter-in-law. And this is video footage time-stamped and dated showing Mrs. Townsend adding an unknown substance to the vitamin pills using a pipette. Garrett watched 30 seconds of the video, then looked at Celeste. Metadata doesn't lie, she said quietly. Celeste's perfect composure finally cracked. Just slightly, just enough. I want my lawyer. You'll get one. Garrett turned to the two officers. Chen Riley, take custody of the evidence. Get statements from everyone here. Officer Riley, the younger female officer, began photographing everything. Officer Harris, stolid and methodical, started writing in a notebook. Garrett pulled out handcuffs. Brock Townsend, Celeste Townsend, you're both under arrest for attempted murder conspiracy to commit murder fraud and attempted guardianship fraud. Brock didn't move, just sat there staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. Celeste straightened her shoulders. This is a misunderstanding. My husband, save it for your lawyer. Garrett's voice was flat, professional. You have the right to remain silent. She recited the Miranda rights while Officer Harris cuffed Brock's wrists. He didn't resist, didn't protest, just let the steel close around his skin with the blank expression of someone whose world had ended. Watching your son's wrists disappear into handcuffs because he tried to kill you feels like dying and surviving at the same time. Celeste got cuffed next. She stood perfectly still, face composed except for her eyes. Those eyes promised this wasn't over. I'll be out by Monday, she said calmly. Maybe. Garrett didn't sound impressed. Or maybe you'll be awaiting trial for first-degree attempted murder. Premeditation, planning, execution, we have it all documented. They started leading them toward the door. Brock moved like a sleepwalker. Then he stopped, turned back to me. Dad, his voice broke. I didn't know she wanted you dead. I swear to God I didn't know she was... I thought the vitamins were just vitamins. I thought... Move along, Officer Harris said gently but firmly. I crossed to my son before they could take him away, reached into my breast pocket and pulled out Eleanor's letter. The paper felt thin and fragile, 30 years old, carrying truths that should have been spoken decades ago. I placed it in his cuffed hands. Read it, I said. Read and understand what your father did 30 years ago. Brock looked at the letter, then at me. What is this? The truth your mother kept from both of us. The truth she asked me never to tell you. The truth that might have prevented all of this if I hadn't kept her secret. His fingers closed around the envelope. I loved her, he whispered. I just wanted what you owed her. I know, read the letter, you'll understand. Officer Harris led him toward the door. Celeste followed, not looking at anyone, her perfect mask back in place. Dr. Whitmore was already being questioned by Officer Riley. His face had gone gray, probably realizing his $5,000 signature was going to cost him a lot more than money. The door closed behind them. The house fell silent. No footsteps upstairs, no Celeste arranging flowers, no Brock calling at 9 a.m., just us. Finn stood frozen by the hallway watching where his parents had disappeared.
His face was white. His hands trembled.
Finn, I said softly. He looked at me with eyes full of questions he couldn't ask. Come here. He crossed the room slowly. Do you... His voice cracked. Started again. Do you still want me to call you Grandpa? The question hit harder than anything Celeste had said. This 17-year-old boy who'd betrayed his parents to save my life, who'd carried evidence for months, who'd had the courage to speak truth when it mattered most, asking if I still wanted him. Finn. I pulled him into my arms, held him tight. You didn't betray this family. You saved the rest of us. You saved me. His shoulders shook. The first tears I'd seen from him since this began. He cried like someone who'd been holding it in for months. Iris joined us, wrapping her arms around both of us. Harlan stood quietly by the window, giving us space, but staying present. I'm sorry, Finn managed between sobs. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I should have. You told me when it mattered. That's what counts. We stood there for a long time. 3 generations of Townsends minus the 2 who'd tried to destroy us, building something new from the wreckage. Finally, Finn pulled back, wiped his eyes. What happens now? Now, I looked at Iris, at Harlan, at my grandson. Now we figure out how to be a family again, the right way this time. My stomach growled, loud enough that everyone heard it. Finn almost smiled. Grandpa, I'm very hungry, I said, and the words felt like coming back to life. Haven't been hungry in a long time. That hunger came back slowly over the following weeks. First as a mild interest in food, then as actual desire, then as the kind of appetite that meant my body was healing. 14 months after the arrests, I sat in Cook County Courthouse watching the judge's gavel fall. The sound echoed like a door closing on 22 years. Judge Morrison, a woman in her mid-50s with steel-gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd heard every excuse, looked down from the bench at Celeste and Brock. Celeste Townsend, her voice carried absolute authority. The evidence against you is overwhelming. Video documentation of you tampering with medication, audio recordings of conspiracy, digital forensics proving you manufactured evidence to frame your husband, toxicology reports showing deliberate calculated poisoning designed to cause organ failure. Celeste stood perfectly straight, no emotion visible, just that same cold composure she'd worn since the day I first met her 15 years ago. 22 years Illinois Department of Corrections. No parole eligibility before 15 years served. The gavel fell again. Celeste didn't flinch, just nodded once as if the judge had confirmed a meeting time. Brock stood beside her in County Jail Orange. He'd lost weight. His face looked hollow. The confident man who'd walked through my door with poisoned gifts was gone, replaced by someone who looked like he'd been drowning for weeks. Brock Townsend. Judge Morrison's voice softened slightly. Not much, but enough to notice. The evidence shows you were manipulated by your wife, but you were not innocent. You researched guardianship fraud. You brought toxic substances into your father's home. You monitored his consumption daily. You participated in a conspiracy to commit murder, even if you didn't understand the full scope of your wife's plan. Brock stared at his hands. 20 years Illinois Department of Corrections. Given your secondary role and evidence of manipulation, the court imposes the minimum sentence allowable under Illinois law. The gavel fell for the third time. Prosecutor Sullivan, the assistant state's attorney who'd built the case, stood. Mid-30s, sharp-eyed, the kind of lawyer who believed in justice the way some people believe in religion. Your Honor, justice has been served for Mr. Alvin Townsend, who nearly lost his life to this conspiracy. Morrison nodded. Court adjourned. Officers moved to escort Brock and Celeste from the courtroom. Celeste walked with her head high, already calculating her appeals. But Brock stopped beside the row where Finn, Iris, and I sat. For the first time in weeks, he looked directly at me. Dad, his voice was barely a whisper. I'm sorry, I read her letter 3 times. In county jail, I read it 3 times. Watching your son shuffle toward the courtroom door in chains feels like watching part of yourself die. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just the quiet ache of a family breaking for good.
I know you do, I said quietly. I thought... He stopped, started again. I thought you chose money over Mom. Her whole life I thought you sold the land instead of saving her, but you sold it to save her, and I never knew. God, Dad, I never knew.
Your mother wanted it that way.
I know. The letter explained. She explained everything. His eyes were wet. Tell Finn, tell him I'm sorry I never saw him. Never really saw him. He's braver than I ever was.
The officer touched his elbow gently. Time to go. Brock shuffled toward the door. I watched until he disappeared through it. 12 years. He'd be 62 when he got out if he served the full term. Finn would be 29. I'd be 81, if I lived that long. Weeks after the sentencing, February brought the first signs of real spring, early thaw, birds returning, life resuming. I sat in Harlan's office in downtown Evanston looking healthier than I had in a year. I'd gained back 20 pounds. Color had returned to my face. Hair was growing back in patches. The trembling in my hands was completely gone. Your restructuring's everything, Harlan said, spreading the new will documents across his desk. Mansion and mineral rights split equally between Iris and a trust fund for Finn. The trust covers college living expenses and an independent start, I confirmed. No strings attached, no conditions, just resources for him to build whatever life he wants. Iris, sitting beside Finn, shook her head. Alvin, this is more than generous. You're essentially giving him half of everything. Not giving, investing in someone who proved he deserved it. Finn had been quiet through most of the meeting. Now he spoke up, voice uncertain. Grandpa, you don't need to do this. After what they did to you, after what my parents... How do you quantify what someone's courage is worth in dollars and property deeds? Let me read you something, I said, picking up the final page of the will. Harlan had drafted it exactly as I'd requested. The legal language was dense, but the final clause was in my own words. I read it aloud. I leave this inheritance not to buy loyalty or affection, not as payment for services rendered and not out of obligation. I leave it because my grandson Finn Townsend proved that some people deserve the best you can give them. He had every reason to stay silent, loyalty to his parents, fear of consequences, the comfort of pretending not to know. Instead, he chose truth at great personal cost. He chose me when choosing me meant losing everything else. This inheritance honors that choice. It honors his courage. And it honors the kind of family we build when we choose it instead of being born into it. The office was quiet for a moment. Finn's eyes were wet. Grandpa, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything. I set down the page, looked at him directly. You saved my life, Finn. You carried that evidence for months. You made the hardest call a 17-year-old should never have to make. This isn't charity. This isn't guilt. This is me making sure the person who had my back when no one else did has the resources to build a good life. But I don't need... I know, I smiled. That's why you're getting it. Rebuilding after betrayal looks like small moments, weekly dinners, doctor appointments, learning to trust tea again. Late March. I sat in Dr. Sinclair's office at North Shore Hospital while he reviewed my 3-month blood panel. Finn had driven me, insisted on coming in for the results. The same toxicology expert who'd analyzed the poisoned vitamins had agreed to oversee my medical recovery. He looked up from the lab results and smiled for the first time in months. The toxins are gone, he said, completely. Your liver and kidneys are recovering remarkably well, better than I expected, honestly. I gripped the armrest. So I'm not dying anymore. You're not dying anymore. He set down the papers. You've gained back 18 pounds. Hair's growing back. Color's returned to your face. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I'm eating, I said, and not taking vitamins from people who want me dead. Finn laughed. First real laugh I'd heard from him in months. The recovery was physical, but the healing was something else entirely.
March through June, we fell into a rhythm. Sunday dinners at the mansion. Iris stayed for 2 months using vacation time and remote work to help me get back on my feet. Literally at first, then figuratively. We cooked together in Eleanor's kitchen. Simple meals, nothing fancy. Spaghetti, roasted chicken, the kind of food that tastes like home. "You need to eat more," Iris said one Sunday in April, watching me push food around my plate. 18 pounds is good, but you're still too thin." "I'm working on it." Finn sat across from me doing calculus homework between bites. 17, going on 18, already looking at colleges. "Should I tell you about Northwestern's pre-med program?" he asked, not looking up from his textbook. "I want to hear everything," I said, and meant it. He talked about molecular biology, chemistry requirements, the MCAT. His voice carried hope I hadn't heard since before that midnight phone call that started everything. Watching Finn talk about his future, I realized family isn't who shares your blood, it's who calls for help when you're dying. Mid-May brought warm weather and a decision I'd been considering for weeks. Hazel arrived Sunday afternoon to prepare the dining room for our weekly meal like she'd done for 23 years. I found her in the kitchen, arranging flowers in Eleanor's favorite vase. "Hazel, sit down." She looked confused. "Mr. Townsend, I need to set the table." "Sit, please." She sat still, holding the flowers.
"If you hadn't called my daughter when you did, I wouldn't be here. You looked over that fence and decided my life mattered. You're not hired help, Hazel, you're family."
Her eyes filled. "I just did what was right." "That's exactly why you belong here." Iris entered from the hallway carrying plates. "Tonight you eat with us. No arguments." We set 4 places. For the first time in 23 years, Hazel sat at the dining table instead of serving from it. She cried through most of dinner. Happy tears, she insisted. The kind that come from finally being seen. Early June brought a phone call I'd been expecting. The mining company. Different representative, same pitch. They'd learned about the criminal case, probably figured I might be more motivated to sell now. "Mr. Townsend, we're prepared to offer $31 million for the mineral rights beneath your property. That's as high as we can go. It's a generous offer for land you're not using." I looked out my office window at the backyard where Eleanor had planted roses 40 years ago, where Brock learned to ride a bike, where Iris had her 8th birthday party, where Finn and I now had coffee on Sunday mornings. The answer is still no. "Sir, with respect, this is significantly above market value. Your son tried to, well, given the circumstances, I thought you might reconsider." "You thought wrong." I kept my voice level. "This land is where my wife and I built our life together, where she planted those roses you can probably see from the street. My son tried to kill me for money. Selling now would prove he was right that everything has a price." Silence on the line. "Some things shouldn't be measured in money," I said. "This is one of them." I hung up. Sat at Eleanor's desk for a long time looking at the garden. $31 million. Enough to never worry about anything again. Enough to buy whatever comfort money could provide. Eleanor loved this land. That was worth more than their money. More than all of it. Late June evening kitchen, warm with summer light. Finn sat at the counter working through college essay drafts. I made tea. Not the chamomile blend Celeste had brought. Different brand. Different store. I'd tried twice since the arrest, and both times my hands shook just looking at the cup. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt safe. I brewed a cup. Ordinary black tea, nothing special. Brought it to the counter and sat beside Finn. "You okay, Grandpa?" He'd noticed me staring at the mug. The tea doesn't taste like fear anymore. I sipped carefully, let the warmth spread, tasted the actual flavor instead of poison or dread. Just tea. Just a normal evening in a kitchen that had survived attempted murder and family betrayal and 30 years of secrets. "Tea tastes good," I said for the first time in a year. Finn set down his pen, looked at me with understanding beyond his years. "That's good, Grandpa. That's really good." We sat there in comfortable silence. The kind of silence that means you don't need to fill the space with words. Outside, fireflies started their evening dance.
Inside the kitchen smelled like tea and college essay ink and something that felt remarkably like peace.
I'd survived. More than that, I'd built something new from the wreckage. Family that wasn't born but chosen. Trust that was earned, not assumed. A life measured in Sunday dinners and college essays and tea that finally tasted right. The mansion was quieter now. No Celeste arranging flowers, no Brock's 9 a.m. calls. Just me and Finn, and weekly visits from Iris and Hazel becoming part of something that looked like family. Real family this time. The kind that saves you instead of trying to bury you.
Peace, I learned, doesn't come from winning. It comes from making sure no one else has to fight the same battle. December 2024 brought me to the Evanston Senior Community Center for a reason I never imagined surviving long enough to fulfill.
Backstage. Iris adjusted my collar for the third time. Nervous habit. Finn stood beside her holding a bottle of water, the same protective stance he'd held for a year now. 17 years old and already understood what most adults never learn. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth when everyone wants you to stay quiet. You don't have to do this if you're not ready, Iris said softly. I'm ready. My hands weren't shaking anymore. 6 months ago they would have been. If one person recognizes the pattern, it's worth it. Finn met my eyes. You're going to save someone today. I thought about that water purifier, the chamomile tea, the vitamins that tasted like dust and poison, how close I'd come to dying in my own kitchen, killed by morning routines designed to look like care. How many others were sitting at breakfast tables right now trusting the wrong hands? Director Paulson appeared in the doorway, a woman in her mid-50s who'd spent 20 years running senior community programs. She'd called me 2 months ago after reading about the trial in the Tribune, asked if I'd be willing to share my story, warned other elders about what predatory care actually looks like. 70 people registered, she said. They need to hear this. I walked onto that stage carrying 3 things: my story, my scars, and the weight of knowing I'd survived for a purpose beyond just living. The auditorium lights were too bright. 70 faces looked back at me, most of them over 60, all of them wondering what an elder abuse survivor looked like up close. I stood at the podium and began with the sentence I'd practiced for 3 months. My son tried to kill me. The room went completely silent. Not with a gun or a knife. Not with violence you could see coming. He did it with vitamins and chamomile tea. With a water purifier, with gifts that looked like a son finally caring about his father after years of distance. I told them about April 2023, how Brock showed up after barely seeing me for years, suddenly concerned about my health. How the presents came with instructions. Use this filter for all your water, drink this tea every morning, take these vitamins twice daily. How the gifts required daily use, daily dependence, daily trust. Within weeks I was sick, nauseous every morning, lost 35 pounds in 5 months, hair falling out. Couldn't walk to my mailbox without forgetting why I'd gone outside. 3 different doctors couldn't find anything wrong because they were looking for diseases, not murder. Iris sat in the front row beside Finn, both watching me transform 8 months of dying into a warning that might save someone else's life. The poisoning wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the isolation. My son took over my medical appointments, intercepted my mail, controlled every phone call, every visitor, every piece of information that came into my house. By the time I realized what was happening, he'd already cut me off from everyone who might have helped. I paused. Looked at those 70 faces. How many elderly parents are sitting at kitchen tables right now sipping something their children made, wondering why they're so tired all the time? These things don't always look like violence, I said. Sometimes they look like your family finally caring after years of distance. Sometimes they look like a son bringing you tea. That's what makes it so dangerous. Abuse disguised as affection is the hardest kind to recognize and the easiest kind to die from.
A woman in the third row was crying quietly. A man in the back row was taking notes. Several people were nodding, recognition spreading across faces like cold water.
If someone suddenly wants to manage your finances, your medical care, your daily routine, ask why now. If gifts come with requirements, if care comes with isolation, if affection requires you to cut off everyone else who loves you, those aren't warning signs, those are weapons. The speech lasted 20 minutes. The silence afterward lasted longer. Then questions came. A woman asked, "How do we know the difference between genuine help and control?" "Real care respects your autonomy," I answered. "Manipulation requires your dependence. Real love wants you stronger. Abuse needs you weak." A man in the back. "What made you finally realize what was happening?" "My 17-year-old grandson found evidence his mother was poisoning me. He told the truth when every adult in the room was too afraid to speak. Sometimes the people who save you aren't the ones you expect." The Q&A session ended. People stood, gathered their coats, filed toward the exits. Several came forward to thank me, to say they'd watch for the patterns, to say they'd finally understood why their daughter's sudden attention felt wrong. Then an elderly man approached with trembling hands. He was 76, thin in the way that comes from losing weight too fast, with gray skin and exhausted eyes I recognized from my own bathroom mirror a year ago. Walter Mitchell, widower, living alone in the house he'd shared with his wife for 40 years until she passed last spring. "You just described what's happening to me," he said quietly. "Right now." Iris stood. Finn moved closer. "Tell me," I said. Walter's voice shook. "My son moved back in after his divorce 6 months ago. Says he's worried about me living alone. Makes me smoothies every morning, special recipe for my health, he says. But I've been getting weaker. He's taken over my banking, canceled the doctor I've seen for 20 years and found a new one. Won't let me talk to my sister on the phone unless he's in the room." Every word was a mirror of my own story. The smoothies were my tea, the banking control, the medical isolation, the same calculated pattern unfolding in real time, one kitchen away from killing another father. Watching Walter's hand shake, I realized this was why I'd survived, not just to live, but to keep others from dying the same way I almost did. "Have you told anyone outside your house about this?" I asked. Walter shook his head. "He monitors everything. I came here alone because he thinks I'm at the pharmacy." Iris already had her phone out. Finn was writing down Walter's information. Director Paulson was calling the elder abuse hotline. The machinery of intervention clicking into place because one man recognized the truth in time. "You're going to be okay," I told Walter. "You recognize the pattern. That's the hardest part. Everything else we can fix." Walter Mitchell's son was arrested 3 days after my talk. Detective Garrett moved fast once I called. Officers found antifreeze in the garage, unregistered, hidden behind paint cans. Same chemical signature Brock used. Walter's staying with his daughter in Wisconsin now. Alive because he recognized the pattern in time. The coffee doesn't smell like danger anymore, just coffee. I stand in my kitchen on a December morning 1 year and 8 months after my son first handed me poison tea, and I make myself breakfast without checking every ingredient twice. The eggs sizzle in the pan. Toast browns in the toaster Eleanor and I bought in 1998. Orange juice from a carton I opened myself, poured myself trust completely. 1 year ago, I couldn't hold a cup without my hands shaking. Now I make my own coffee. Small victory, but mine. The reflection in the kitchen window shows a different man than the one who stood here in June 2023. Hair grown back silver gray and thick enough to need cutting. Face filled out color returned to skin that was gray pale for months. I stepped on the scale this morning, 172 pounds. Eleanor would say I need to eat more, but 172 is 42 pounds heavier than my lowest point. 42 pounds of life I wasn't supposed to have. I practice something Iris taught me. Every morning, 3 things I'm grateful for. She learned it from a therapist after Eleanor died. Said it helped her survive grief without letting it consume her. Now I use it to survive grace without forgetting how close I came to losing everything.
Finn, 18 years old now, living in the apartment above Hazel's garage, working construction and taking night classes at community college. Braver than any adult in that house when it mattered most. He found evidence his mother was poisoning me and chose truth over family loyalty, chose my life over his comfort. Most people twice his age don't have that kind of courage.
Iris, she flew from California because Hazel called, because she believed me when her brother spent months building a narrative that I was mentally declining, that the concerned family needed to take control, that I couldn't be trusted with my own life. She walked through my door that November night, saw what Brock had hidden, and stayed. Every Sunday dinner since then, she's driven 4 hours just to sit at my table.
Hazel, 74 years old, lived next door for 23 years, and I'd never invited her inside until last year. She looked over that fence, saw a man dying alone, and decided my life was her business after all. Made 2 phone calls that saved me. Sometimes the people who save you aren't the ones you expect. Sometimes they're the neighbors you've ignored for 2 decades because you were too wrapped up in your own grief to notice anyone else's kindness. 3 blessings. Every morning, I say their names like a prayer. Walter Mitchell is alive because he came to my talk yesterday. His son's in custody now, same charge as Brock, attempted murder. Same pattern, same poison, same calculated cruelty disguised as filial care. But Walter survived because I survived first, because I learned to recognize the weapon that looks like morning tea. I survived so Walter could survive. Maybe that's the point of living through something that should have killed you, not just to save yourself, but to become the warning that saves someone else. Saving Walter felt like paying forward the phone call Hazel made. One person looking over a fence and deciding someone else's life mattered. One person speaking truth when silence would have been easier. That's how we survive the things that try to bury us, by refusing to let the next person get buried the same way. Evening comes quiet. I sit in my study, the room where I used to hide from my own life. Eleanor's keepsake box rests open on the desk, her letter to Harlan visible now. Confession she carried for 30 years no longer locked away. I read it sometimes, not to punish myself with old secrets, but to remember that even the people we love are human, flawed, capable of mistakes that last decades, and still worth loving. Next to the box sits my father's old pocket watch. He gave it to me when I graduated high school in 1963, pressed it into my palm, and said it had been his father's before him. Told me to carry it as a reminder that time matters less than what you do with it. I've carried it for 61 years through marriage and fatherhood and grief and near death, and it's never asked for anything in return. Brock gave me vitamins and tea designed to kill me. Finn gave me truth that saved me. You can't measure the weight of truth in dollars, but you can feel it in the difference between a life that ends and a life that continues. In the difference between dying alone and choosing who sits at your table. In the space between what someone gives you and why they give it. The pocket watch sits heavy in my hand. 3 generations of Townsend men carried this watch because it was given with love, not obligation, not greed, not strategy. My father didn't hand me this watch hoping I'd die soon so he could inherit my house. He gave it to me because he wanted me to have something that lasted. Things given from love last longer than things given from greed. Brock gave me tea and vitamins designed to end me. Gave me attention designed to isolate me, gave me care designed to kill me.
Every gift came with poison, every gesture came with motive, every moment of his sudden concern was a step toward inheritance worth $35 million. Finn gave me truth no one can take back. Iris gave me belief when doubt would have been easier. Hazel gave me phone calls that shattered my son's carefully constructed lie. They gave me things you can't put a price on, time I wasn't supposed to have family, I didn't know I was allowed to choose mornings where coffee just smells like coffee. I set the pocket watch back on the desk beside Eleanor's open box. 2 artifacts from 2 different kinds of love, one that survived death, one that survived secrets, both worth keeping, both worth the years they've asked from me. The study is quiet. The house is mine. The tea in the kitchen cabinet is just tea, and I know which gift I'll keep for the rest of my life. Not the one that tried to bury me, the one that taught me how to survive. And to you listening to my story, remember this. The people who save you aren't always the ones you expect. I made the mistake of trusting blood over truth. For months, I ignored the warning signs because I couldn't imagine my own son would choose money over my life. Don't make my mistake. If something feels wrong, if someone's sudden care comes with conditions, if gifts require dependence, if love demands isolation, listen to that voice inside you. I nearly died because I silenced mine. Here's what I learned from surviving family betrayal. Revenge, real family isn't defined by genetics. It's defined by who shows up when you're dying and refuses to look away. My grandson Finn was 17 when he chose truth over loyalty to his parents. My daughter Iris drove 4 hours every week to sit at my table. My neighbor Hazel made 2 phone calls that saved my life. These family Reddit stories we hear about elder abuse and betrayal, they're not just stories, they're warnings. And I believe God put me through this hell so I could stand in front of 70 seniors and save Walter Mitchell's life the day after I told my story. That's the purpose that came from the poison. If you've been affected by family betrayal revenge or know someone navigating these painful family Reddit stories, please share this video. Your comment might be the one that helps someone recognize the pattern before it's too late. And if these kinds of stories matter to you, please subscribe to Dad's Silent Revenge. This community is built on truth, survival, and the families we choose. Thank you for staying until the very end. Some details in this story have been fictionalized for impact and reflection, but the message is real. You deserve to be protected, not poisoned by the people who claim to love you.